Good morning, Michael.
Good afternoon, Tom. It's a pleasure. First episode of Coffee with Tom and Michael, the preseason trial run.
Absolutely. I am drinking it's a Starbucks Nespresso capsule, but it's actually perfectly acceptable to drink.
You know, I'm drinking Kirkland medium roast from Costco, which after a lot of experimentation turns out to be an ideal combination of bulk, low cost, and very damn good. They make great stuff. We are making this in a premium Mocha Master coffee maker, which is legend down at Williams-Sonoma as the best coffee maker you can buy for under $1,000. Basically replicates the pour over, right? So it's sprinkling coffee, and it's kind of cool because it has this little thumbprint finger thingy on the front of it, so you can move the water bar back and forth to agitate all the coffee and make sure that you get what you're after, which is a high degree of melted solids. That's all I know about making coffee.
That's absolutely right. Now, do you prefer a single bean or do you prefer a blend in your coffee?
Knowing my wine habits, I prefer a blend.
Yeah, you see, now my view is definitely when it comes to coffee, if you're going to get the best coffee you can, you need to have multiple different types of beans and you need to put them all together in order to get the best results. You know, you can't just use one type of bean for every sort of coffee.
Do you have an Nespresso machine?
Yeah, no, I do. You can you
okay, so we can work our way through the Nespresso coffee library and do taste testings.
Yeah, we could. But look, I gave you a segue to go into, isn't that funny? Because granular TV data is the same thing. You also need different kinds of beans. You need a blend.
Absolutely.
The thing is, granular TV data is just like coffee. Yeah, and what you need is you need a blend. Yeah, it's not just about having the best bean. You need the right bean for the different circumstances.
So we're just about to put out our white paper on combining data sets. We don't want to try to cover the whole white paper here because, well, that would be boring. But it is interesting to sort of know, why is it now that this is starting to become a topic? I mean, what do you think is causing folks to take a greater interest in combined data sets?
It's interesting. I mean, I wonder how much of it's actually driven by the demand side and how much by the supply side. So, I mean, fourth wall, that data set's been available forever. Yeah. Right. Inkscape has come to market, massively, I think, over the last 3 years. Right. I think, Charter and Cox only through 605, their data is now starting to become available. Comcast are licensing their data out as well to some of the programming groups. So I think there's definitely a push from the supply side, and on the demand side, I don't know if there's a demand for more data sets.
There is
data, isn't there?
I think that there's actually two drivers from what I can see on the demand side. One is, last year was sort of the sparkling new year for attribution, and everybody did attribution for everything. And I think as part of that, I mean, as we've seen, there are times when data scale is an issue for certain types of campaigns. So sometimes 3 million homes from an ACR data set doesn't quite get you there. And I think the other thing is the market's come along far enough now where people do start to understand the relative strengths of the different data sets. So people who've been exercising ACR data have run into its limitations, and people who've been exercising set-top box data have run into its limitations. And I think there's this hypothesis, which we've seen proven, that there are ways to use combinations of data to overcome limitations. So Tom, we recently had an opportunity to combine, to actually enhance a set-top box data set by fusing and applying smart TV data. And we'll leave the client nameless because I think that's what they prefer, but what was the goal of that and how well did that work?
So primarily the goal was to fill in geographic gaps. Classic problem that you have with set-top box data you don't have in the whole of the country. The second thing that they started to do was get obsessed about numbers. But actually, when you looked at the real use of it, you're limited by the granularity that you've got in your most representative data set. If, for example, you haven't got any data in San Francisco, then your national representativeness is just limited by the amount of data you do have in that market from your smaller data set. Set-top box data in market is always going to be bigger than ACR data. But actually, nationally, you're limited by how much coverage you get from your ACR data outside of market. It also doesn't mean you can't use the advantages of the set-top box data like granular VOD, long tail DVR reporting, all of the things that you can't do so easily with ACR. You can do that, and you can you can have really exact data in market, and you can model it out of market. So it's really valuable. But the subtleties of it are much more complicated, I think, than people realize.
So, one of the things that I found interesting in working on the paper was your views around the downsides of combining data. I'm curious what the strengths are of the combination in terms of measurement. And then I'm curious about how combining data sets actually has a weakest link issue, and what holes that creates for us, what pitfalls that creates for us.
I think it does vary from campaign to campaign. So, I mean, let's take an example. If you're running a campaign, a national campaign, where you've got a national buy, let's say you've got a local buy, you've got an addressable buy, you've got MVP. Something like that, ACR data is pretty good. If you can get the creative ahead of time, you can ingest the creative, you can see the creative every time it's viewed on every single TV. So we're covering national, we're covering local, we're covering addressable, and we've got it all. We've got it real time. We've got it next day. That's really good. If we try to do the same thing with set-top box data, we'd have huge gaps in addressable. We'd have issues with local. We could use as runs pretty effectively in order to be able to do the national, but we'd have issues local. But ACR in that case, that only works well if you can get the creative ahead of the campaign. If you can't get the creative ahead of the campaign, ACR's pretty blind. You've got to rely on as runs. If you're in the world of as runs, you're probably actually better off, I would say, with set-top box data than you are with ACR data. So I think a lot of it depends on it really depends on the use case.
The reason for that is that when you apply as run logs, you're applying it to a known viewing stream. And with the set-top box, if there's a channel change, it's bright line in the set-top box data set. Whereas in the smart TV data set, there is no channel change indicator that's bright line. So you don't exactly know how to apply the as run log to the time stream, right? So the precision of it is higher because the set-top box data is fundamentally click-based.
If you're using as runs for live, then you're fine with set-top box data or with ACR data. If you're looking at light time shifting, and so that's the behavior where you go in, you pause up, show at the beginning, you start running again 10 minutes later, and you skip through some of the ads. If you're in that scenario, which there is a significant amount of viewing on that, you're much better off in set-top box data than you are in ACR data. I haven't seen an ACR data set which gives me, the granularity for that light time shifting to make me, give me the same level of confidence I have out of set-top box data.
SIM's interest is, and many people's interest is, to take the strengths of set-top box data, for example, same-day time-shifted viewing measurement, and the strength of ACR data, for example, measuring addressable, right? And to push these two together and get a single data set that combines the strengths of both. By creating a kind of unified device graph, linking data from set-tops and data from TVs, I can have a single identity set against which I can ask the smart TV data for addressable advertising information, and I can ask the cable data or other set-top box data, I guess, for information about time-shifted viewing. But I can't push the two together. It's just that I can push them together at the identity level, but the data sets still remain discrete.
You need to keep them discrete, and also you need to harmonize. What I think is going to happen next is people in the industry are going to stop talking about, how many different data sets they've got together and how big the data sets are, and they're going to start focusing on the expertise that they've got amongst their analysts in order to be able to know which are the right data sets to apply in the different areas.
That's right.
And we see this huge process where everyone's insourcing these data sets, they're taking them in-house, they're merging them together. And the conversation is going to start to be about the smarts, about, I've got guys and they know which data sets are the right ones to use in these different use cases. That's the conversation I think the industry needs to start having.
Right. That's really interesting. The other thing that's interesting is it seems like when you build these combined data sets, we ended up kind of getting into the representativeness market based on an exercise to combine data sets, right? And you have to maintain them, right? So there are privacy issues that come into maintaining them. What else comes into it?
For example, if you get Nielsen Emerald data, it comes in a format that's been stable for, at least years. I mean, sometimes it feels like probably decades. One of the great things about Nielsen is it's stable and it's consistent. You know, a new model of set-top box launches, you'll have a new feature, you'll get changes to the way the set-top box data comes. Yeah, and it won't be for all of the set-top boxes. It won't affect the old ones. It'll only be the modern ones. Yeah, ACR vendors are all launching new features all the time. Yeah?
Right. Right.
And you know, you've got to manage that fusion. You know, if you once you've done the project once, it doesn't mean it's done. You know, you're going to constantly making enhancements to support the changes that the vendors are providing.
Back to the question of combining data sets. We've talked about combining smart TV data with set-top box data. To what extent do we go a step further and then add in digital data to create a truly cross-platform data set?
This is the real driver, isn't it? Everyone's building great big data platforms of their own. You know, first-party data, and that's predominantly driven by digital. Yeah. And if you're launching a digital direct-to-consumer service, which everyone has got now, they're going to get gigabytes of data on a daily basis about how many people are using it, how they're using it. Yeah. And what that all comes with is it all comes with IP address, stuff you can match to LiveRamp, stuff you can match to Experian, and from that you can then match it to granular TV data sets. I'm much less excited by the opportunity to combine together smart TV and set-top box data than I am to be able to combine together streaming data and either set-top box or smart TV data.
And there's the specific subset of streaming data that we seem to be getting a lot of activity around, which of course is connected TV data. Yeah. It's a little different, right? Because it doesn't have cookies of any sort. But it is fundamentally fixed device based for the most part. That's just booming right now, right?
That's a really, really interesting area because, of course, you know, the most widely available ACR data is Inscape data, which is only the Vizio TVs. Yeah, but obviously viewing on Vizio TVs is going to be quite different to viewing on Samsung or LG TVs when it comes to the CTV app. Ironically, I'd say ACR data, although it's certainly the easiest data set to play with, it's clearly got some biases. How do you fuse set-top box data into CTV data? These are complexities that I think are things that people haven't dealt with yet, but we need to get across.
I think that platform bias is mitigated by the fact that the linear TV viewing is being supplied by Charter and DirecTV and Comcast and all these other companies. So I generally tend to think that the skews in the linear data are driven less by the platform and more by the demographic skews, whereas the application consumption, the CTV side of a different OEM's business, I think is subject to platform bias because the scope of apps available, the amount of emphasis placed in the user experience on app consumption, so on and so forth, actually even brand affinity. I mean, people who are going to Roku enabled TVs probably have brand affinity with Roku and probably have a stronger bias towards using CTV apps, for example.
I do absolutely agree with that. And I think you've got. I mean, the other thing I would say is, you know, Vizio is a well-known mass market brand. Yeah.
Right.
You know, yes, they got big TVs, but actually they're all relatively low priced. Yeah.
Right.
I think a lot of the higher end smart TVs, they're going to have much more of a skew, you know, towards people who can afford them. Really.